The bullet shattered the train window 3 inches from Evelyn Whitmore's face, and in that crystalline moment, glass suspended like diamonds in the desert air, she understood that everything she'd been taught about survival was a lie. The Apache warrior's hand closed around her wrist, not roughly, but with the certainty of someone who'd already decided she was worth saving. "Run," he commanded, and God help her she did. Follow this story to its breathtaking end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this forbidden love travels. The Union Pacific thundered west through Arizona territory like a steel serpent cutting through God's forgotten country, its whistle screaming promises of civilization into a landscape that had never asked for it. Inside the first-class car, Evelyn Whitmore sat rigid as a porcelain doll, her spine never touching the burgundy velvet seat. 23 years of deportment lessons made flesh. The corset beneath her traveling dress of emerald silk crushed her ribs with each breath, a constant reminder that a lady must suffer beautifully. She studied her reflection in the window, watching her ghost self float across the passing desert. Ringlets of honey-colored hair framed a face that society pages called angelically refined. Her father's words echoed in her skull like a death knell. Marcus Thornhill owns half of Denver's silver mines. This marriage secures our empire. Empire. As if love were mineral rights to be surveyed and claimed. The engagement ring on her finger caught the afternoon light. A monstrous diamond that felt more like a shackle than a promise. She'd never even met Marcus Thornhill, only seen his daguerreotype, a man with cold eyes, and the smile of someone who'd never been refused anything. "More champagne, Miss Whitmore?" The porter hovered solicitous. "No, thank you." Her voice carried that particular San Francisco finishing school accent, each syllable polished smooth as river stones. She was performing. She'd been performing her entire life. The train's rhythm changed, a subtle thing. Most passengers wouldn't notice, but Evelyn had developed a sixth sense for disruption. Years of walking on eggshells around her father's volatile temperament had taught her to read the weight of silence, the texture of wrong. Then came the sound, not quite a scream, more like the moment before one, that intake of breath, when the body knows what the mind hasn't yet accepted. The train lurched. Champagne flutes crashed to the floor, golden liquid spreading like blood across imported carpet. "Apache!" someone shrieked. The word detonated through the car. Chaos bloomed instant and absolute. Women screamed, men scrambled for pistols they'd never fired in anger. The train's brakes shrieked metal on metal, and Evelyn was thrown forward, her carefully arranged world tilting sideways. The window beside her exploded. Time fractured. Glass became a constellation of tiny stars, each fragment catching sunlight as it spun through air that suddenly tasted like gunpowder and terror. Evelyn saw the bullet, actually saw it streak past her temple, close enough to feel its heat. The hole it punched through the opposite wall was perfectly round, almost beautiful in its precision. Her ears rang. Someone was screaming. After a moment, she realized it was her. The train shuddered to a stop. Through the shattered window, Evelyn glimpsed them riders emerging from the rocks and scrub-like spirits, materializing from the land itself. They moved with a fluidity that made the cavalry seem clumsy by comparison, their ponies dancing between saguaro shadows. War cries split the air, sounds that reached back to something older than railroads, older than manifest destiny. More gunfire. The acrid smoke of it filled the car. A conductor stumbled past, blood streaming from his shoulder, his face the color of old newspaper. "Everyone down," he gasped. "For Christ's sake, get down." But Evelyn couldn't move. She was a statue, a useless ornament in silk and pearls. All those years learning which fork to use, which men to curtsy to, how to smile without meaning it. None of it had prepared her for this moment when the veneer of civilization peeled away and revealed the raw violence beneath. A man in a business suit rushed past her toward the door, pistol drawn. He made it 3 steps before a bullet found him. He collapsed so suddenly, it seemed theatrical, like he'd simply decided to lie down. His blood pooled dark and impossible against the fancy carpet. That's when Evelyn Whitmore, who'd never seen death, who'd been sheltered from every unpleasant reality of existence, understood with terrible clarity. She was going to die today. She was going to die in her traveling dress, with its mother-of-pearl buttons never having chosen a single important thing in her life. The door to the car exploded inward, not kicked, blown, as if the hinges themselves had surrendered. Two warriors swept through, moving with the controlled violence of men who'd done this before. Their faces were painted for war, but their eyes held something Evelyn didn't expect. Not bloodlust, purpose. One of them was shouting in a language she didn't understand, gesturing at passengers. The other moved methodically through the car, checking bodies, looking for something, someone. Then he turned and his eyes found hers. Evelyn forgot to breathe. He was younger than the others, maybe 30, with long black hair bound with red cloth, and a face that seemed carved from the same stone as the surrounding cliffs. But it was his eyes that pinned her, dark as midnight and impossibly calm in the midst of chaos. He wore a mixture of traditional and stolen clothing, buckskin leggings, a cavalry vest taken from some forgotten battle, a rifle slung across his back with the ease of someone who'd been born holding it. He looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. That was all. 3 seconds for him to catalog every detail: her expensive dress, her terrified face, the diamond on her finger that probably cost more than his entire tribe would see in a lifetime. Then he moved on. She should have been relieved. Instead, she felt strangely insulted. More warriors poured through the car. They were grabbing documents, maps, anything that looked official. One of them found a strongbox under a seat and shot the lock off with casual efficiency. Papers spilled out: deeds, contracts, legal documents. They gathered them with an urgency that suggested this wasn't random violence. This was a raid with a specific target. "Land deeds," whispered an old man crouched beside Evelyn, his face gray with fear. "They're after the land deeds, tribal territories. Someone's been selling them out from under." A warrior's shout cut him off. He'd found something, a leather portfolio stamped with territorial seals. He held it up like a trophy, and a roar of approval echoed through the car. That's when everything went wrong. A young soldier, barely 20, fresh-faced and terrified, lunged from behind a seat with a pistol. His hands shook so badly Evelyn could see it from across the car. He pointed the gun at the nearest warrior's back. "No," Evelyn whispered. "Don't you fool. You'll kill us all." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The warrior spun, not hit but startled. The soldier's next shot went wild, punching through the roof. And then all hell broke loose. The warriors opened fire. Passengers scattered like startled birds. Someone overturned a lamp and flame licked up the curtains. Smoke joined the gunpowder haze, turning the air thick and poisonous. Evelyn ran. She didn't think about it. Her body simply moved, survival instinct overriding a lifetime of proper behavior. She stumbled over bodies, living or dead. She couldn't tell, her skirts tangling around her legs. The heel of her boot caught and snapped. She kicked them both off and kept running. The door. She had to reach the door. Behind her, the fire was spreading, hungry and indifferent. Ahead, smoke and screaming, and the last shreds of her old life. She burst out onto the platform between cars. The desert air hit her like a physical force, hot and clean after the smoke. For one dizzy moment, she stood there suspended between burning train and endless emptiness. Then hands grabbed her. She screamed and fought, clawing at the arms that wrapped around her waist. She was dragged backward off the platform into thin air. They fell together, hitting the ground in a tangle of limbs. Her head cracked against stone, and stars exploded behind her eyes. When her vision cleared, he was there, the warrior with the calm eyes. He'd pulled her off the train before the fire could claim her. "You're welcome," he said, in perfect, unaccented English. Evelyn blinked. Of all the things she'd expected, that wasn't it. You speak. We're not the savages you've been told about." He was already moving, scanning the chaos around them. The train belched black smoke. Riders circled, gathering their stolen documents. The whole raid had taken maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes to shatter her world. "Let me go." She tried to sound commanding, but her voice shook. "Can't do that." "Why not? You have what you came for. Let me go back to—" She gestured at the burning train, realized how ridiculous that sounded, and fell silent. He looked at her, then really looked at her. His gaze traveled over her torn dress, her bare feet, the blood on her temple from where she'd hit the ground. "You're worth more than those deeds," he said quietly. "Your father Whitmore, the San Francisco banker, he's one of the men stealing our land. I saw his signature on half those contracts." Cold dread washed through her. "No, my father is a businessman. He would never. Your father is stealing what doesn't belong to him and calling it civilization." There was no anger in his voice, just fact delivered like a weather report, which means your leverage, insurance that those deeds get returned to the right people. "You're kidnapping me. I'm keeping you alive." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Those riders circling back, half of them are your father's hired guns. They're not here to save you. They're here to kill witnesses and recover his investment. That includes you." "That's a lie." "Is it?" He pointed. "Look." She turned. Riders approached from the east. But these weren't Apache. These were white men with bandanas covering their faces and rifles held ready. They weren't riding to rescue, they were riding to clean up. One of them raised his rifle toward a woman crawling from the wreckage. Evelyn opened her mouth to scream a warning. The shot came before she could make a sound. The woman collapsed and didn't move again. Evelyn's knees gave out. The warrior caught her, his hands surprisingly gentle. "Now do you understand?" he asked softly. "The only thing your father loves is his money. You're a witness to his crimes. That makes you a liability." She wanted to argue, wanted to defend the man who'd raised her, who'd given her everything. But the words died in her throat, because somewhere deep down in a place she'd never let herself acknowledge, she'd always known her father was capable of terrible things. She'd just never thought she'd become one of them. "What's your name?" she heard herself ask. He seemed surprised by the question. "Nahuel." I know who you are, Evelyn Whitmore." He said her name carefully, like it was something fragile. "Which is why we need to run, now." More gunfire erupted, closer this time. Nahuel's hand closed around her wrist, not roughly, but with absolute certainty. The same certainty she'd felt in that split second before the glass exploded, when somehow she'd known he would reach for her. "Can you run?" he asked. She looked down at her bare feet, her ruined dress, her hands that had never done anything more strenuous than embroidery. Every instinct screamed that she couldn't, that she was too refined, too delicate, too civilized for whatever came next. "Yes," she said. They ran. The desert swallowed them immediately. One moment they were exposed, visible to anyone watching. The next they'd dropped into a wash, invisible from above the land itself, offering concealment. Nahuel moved with absolute confidence, pulling her through sand and between rocks, each turn seeming random but clearly following some internal map. Bullets chased them. Evelyn heard them whip past, heard the spray of sand as they impacted nearby. Her lungs burned. The corset she'd thought uncomfortable before now felt like it was actively trying to kill her, crushing her ribs with each gasping breath. "Can't breathe," she gasped. Nahuel stopped. For a terrible moment she thought he'd leave her behind. Instead, he pulled a knife from his belt. "Trust me." She should have said no, should have been terrified. Instead, she turned her back to him. The knife cut through the laces of her dress with surgical precision. She felt the sudden give, the release of pressure. The corset fell away and she gulped air like a drowning woman breaking the surface. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, unable to speak. He'd just cut away part of who she was, literally carved off a piece of her armor. The dress hung loose now, scandalous, improper, and she'd never felt more free. "We move," he said. They ran again. This time she could breathe. This time she kept pace. The desert stretched endlessly before them, all harsh beauty and pitiless sun. Behind them the sounds of pursuit faded, but never disappeared entirely. They were being hunted, both of them now. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning. There was only the rhythm of running, the burn in her legs, the sun hammering down. Nahuel never let go of her wrist. His grip was her anchor, the only thing keeping her from simply collapsing into the sand. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and copper, Nahuel pulled her into a narrow slot canyon. The walls rose 10 feet on either side, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through sideways. At the end, the canyon opened into a small hollow, sheltered and invisible from above. "Here," he said, releasing her at last. "We stop here." Evelyn collapsed immediately. Every muscle in her body screamed. Her feet were torn and bleeding, leaving red prints on the stone. Her dress was in tatters, streaked with dust and sweat and blood, some hers, some from passengers she'd tried to help. She couldn't remember anymore. She should be hysterical. She should be demanding explanations, threatening consequences, playing the affronted lady. Instead, she just sat there, breathing alive in a way she'd never been before. Nahuel crouched beside her, checking her feet with the clinical efficiency of someone used to treating wounds. He produced a water skin and handed it to her. "Small sips," he instructed. "You'll make yourself sick otherwise." The water was warm and tasted faintly of leather, and it was the most delicious thing she'd ever consumed. She forced herself to follow his instructions, though everything in her screamed to gulp it down. "Thank you," she said finally, she gestured vaguely at everything, "for not leaving me." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the canyon entrance, watching for pursuit. "I should have," he said finally. "Would have been smarter, safer, but—" He trailed off, jaw working like he was chewing on words that didn't want to come out. "But," she prompted. He looked at her, then really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not desire, not exactly. Something deeper. Recognition, maybe. Like he saw past the torn silk and bloodied feet to something he hadn't expected to find. "Because leaving you would stain me more than saving you," he said quietly. The words hung in the air between them. Evelyn didn't understand them, not fully, but she felt their weight, their truth. This man, this stranger who by all rights should be her enemy, had made a choice that would cost him, had already cost him, and he'd made it anyway. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why did you speak to me on the train? You looked at me and moved on. You could have just left me there." "I should have." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "But then that fool soldier started shooting, and the fire started, and I looked back and saw you standing there like a porcelain doll in the middle of a battlefield, frozen, about to die because no one ever taught you how to survive anything real. And that made you come back for me." "No." His eyes found hers again. "What made me come back was the look on your face, right before you ran. That moment when you chose survival over propriety, when you kicked off your fancy boots and ran. Most people in your position would have stood there and died gracefully. You chose to live ungracefully instead. That's rare." Evelyn felt something crack open inside her chest. No one had ever seen her clearly before. Not her father, who saw only a business asset. Not her friends, who saw only a reflection of their own privilege. Not even she had seen herself with such clarity. But this stranger, this Apache warrior, who should have been her death, saw her, actually saw her. "What happens now?" she asked. Now Nahuel stood scanning the darkening sky. "Now we survive the night. Tomorrow we move deeper into the territory. Your father's men won't follow us far. They know better. And then we figure out what to do with you." He said it matter-of-factly, without malice. "You're leverage, like I said, but you're also a problem. Can't take you to my people, they'd see you as what you are, the daughter of men who are killing them. Can't send you back to your father, he'd probably have you killed to tie up loose ends. can't just leave you in the desert." He shrugged, a gesture that held more complexity than any words. "So, we improvise." "I could escape," she said, testing. "You could try." He didn't sound concerned. "But you won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're smart enough to know you'd be dead in a day. This land doesn't forgive ignorance." He pulled jerky from somewhere in his clothing and handed her a piece. "Eat. Tomorrow will be harder." Evelyn took the jerky, chewing the tough, smoky meat. It tasted like survival, like a future she couldn't have imagined that morning. As darkness fell and the stars emerged, so many stars, unimaginable numbers of them, a river of light across the infinite sky, she sat beside a man whose name she'd only just learned in a canyon in the middle of nowhere, further from San Francisco than she'd ever been, in ways that had nothing to do with distance. And somewhere in the depths of her shock and fear and exhaustion, Evelyn Whitmore realized something terrifying. She didn't want to go back. Not to her father, not to Marcus Thornhill, not to the life of silk prisons and polite suffocation. That bullet that had missed her face by 3 inches, it had killed someone, just not the person everyone expected. "Nahuel," she said into the darkness. That thing you said, about it staining you more to leave me than to save me. What did you mean?" The silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer, then soft as wind over stone. "In my language we have a word, ihukame. It means the weight of a choice that changes who you are, the moment when you can either become who you're meant to be or remain who you've always been." He paused. "When I looked at you on that train, I knew. Leaving you there would have been easier, safer, but it would have made me less, and I've already lost too much to let go of what's left of my soul." Evelyn closed her eyes. In the dark, behind her lids, she saw it all again, the glass shattering his hand, finding her wrist, the moment when 2 worlds collided, and neither would ever be the same. "Ihukame," she repeated softly, mangling the pronunciation. "Ihukame," he corrected gentler. She tried again, better this time. When she opened her eyes, she found him watching her with an expression she couldn't read, something between surprise and recognition and a kind of careful hope. "Get some sleep," he said finally. "I'll keep watch." "You need to sleep too." "I will, later." "I could." "You don't know what to watch for." Not cruel, just honest. "Sleep, Evelyn. Tomorrow you start learning how to survive out here. Tonight, let me do this one thing." So she did. She lay on hard stone under more stars than she'd ever seen, her body screaming with exhaustion and pain, further from everything familiar than she'd ever imagined possible. And somehow, impossibly, with the quiet sound of Nahuel's breathing nearby and the vast desert stretching endless in all directions, Evelyn Whitmore, who had never slept anywhere but silk sheets, who had never been anywhere without a chaperone, who had never made a single choice that mattered, fell asleep free for the first time in her life. Dawn came like a blade cutting through the canyon darkness with surgical precision. Evelyn woke to pain, a symphony of it, playing every note from her shredded feet to her sunburned shoulders. For one merciful moment she didn't remember where she was. Then memory crashed down like a fallen wall. The train, the bullets, the running. Nahuel. She opened her eyes to find him already awake, crouched at the canyon entrance with his rifle across his knees. He hadn't slept. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself, with that coiled alertness of someone running on will alone. "They're still out there," he said without turning. 3 riders, maybe 4. They circled back around midnight, searching. Evelyn sat up, every muscle protesting. Her dress was stiff with dried sweat and dust. She looked down at herself and barely recognized what she saw. Yesterday morning she'd been a lady. Now she looked like something the desert had chewed up and spat out. "How far behind are they?" Her voice came out rough as sandpaper. "Close enough to matter, far enough that we have a chance if we move smart." He finally looked at her, assessing. "How are your feet?" She glanced down. They were worse than she'd thought, raw, blistered, crusted with blood. I can walk. That's not what I asked. They'll hold. She met his eyes, refusing to flinch. I won't slow you down. Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe, or just the recognition of necessary stubbornness. We'll see. He pulled something from his pack, strips of leather and cloth. Come here. She limped over. He knelt and took her foot in his hands, his touch surprisingly gentle for someone who looked carved from stone. He cleaned the wounds with the water, wrapped them carefully, bound them with the leather strips to make crude moccasins. Where did you learn English? She asked, needing to fill the silence. That school, the one they talk about. Carlisle. The word came out flat, dead. Pennsylvania. They took me when I was 8. Took a lot of us, said they'd civilize us, kill the Indian, save the man. His hands worked methodically as he spoke, wrapping her other foot. They cut our hair, beat us for speaking our language, taught us your God, your letters, your lies about how the world works. I'm sorry. The words felt pathetically inadequate. Don't be. It taught me something useful. He finished tying off the wrapping and looked up at her. It taught me that your civilization is just another word for theft, with paperwork. They dress it up in laws and deeds and divine right, but it's still just taking what isn't yours and calling it progress. Not everyone, your father. He cut her off, not harsh, but firm. Your father sits in an office in San Francisco and signs papers that steal land from people who've lived on it for 1,000 years. He's never seen this desert, never felt its heat or learned its secrets, but he owns it according to his laws, owns it the way he owned you, something to be sold, to the highest bidder. He stood, offering his hand. Tell me that's not theft. She took his hand, let him pull her up. She wanted to argue, wanted to defend her father, her world, everything she'd been raised to believe. But standing there in the desert dawn, wrapped in his makeshift moccasins, the words wouldn't come, because he was right. About her father, about her, about all of it. We need to move, Nahuel said, already scanning the horizon. There's a place, Red Mesa Basin. 3 days hard travel. We can lose them there. 3 days. Evelyn looked at the empty landscape stretching endlessly. I don't, you do. He slung his rifle across his back. Yesterday you ran 10 miles through a desert you'd never seen, in a dress and bare feet with bullets chasing you. Today you'll do it again, and tomorrow, until either we're safe or we're dead. He started walking, not waiting to see if she'd follow. Your choice. Which? She followed. What else could she do? The first hours were hell. The makeshift moccasins helped, but every step still felt like walking on knives. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into something thick and hostile. Sweat soaked through what remained of her dress. Her throat burned with thirst, but Nahuel rationed the water carefully, allowing only small sips at measured intervals. Why are you helping me? She asked during one brief rest in the shadow of a rock formation. Really, not the leverage excuse. You could have left me to your people. Let them decide what to do with me. Nahuel was quiet for a long time, his eyes on the empty land behind them. My sister, he said finally, she was about your age, pretty, gentle. She believed the missionaries when they said they'd teach her, educate her, make her something better. His jaw clenched. They took her to one of their schools. She died there. Consumption, they said. But I knew she died because they tried to kill who she was, and when you kill someone's soul, the body follows. I'm not your sister. No. He looked at her, then really looked at her. But when I saw you on that train, all dressed up like a doll being shipped off to marry a man you'd never met, I saw her, saw what she might have become if she'd lived. Another woman trapped in a cage made of silk and pearls. He took a breath. Maybe I'm just trying to give one woman the choice my sister never got. Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. What was her name? Your sister. Aylin. It means joy. The corner of his mouth lifted in something too sad to be a smile. She lived up to it until she didn't. They walked in silence after that, but it felt different, less like captor and captive, more like two people bound by grief. Neither had chosen, but both understood. By midday, the heat was murderous. The landscape wavered, turning liquid at the edges. Evelyn's vision blurred. She stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. Nahuel's hand found her elbow, steadying her. "There," he said, pointing. "See that rock formation, the one that looks like a bird?" She squinted. Everything looked like heat, shimmer, and pain. "I don't—" "Look harder, below the surface. The land tells you where the water is, if you know how to listen." She tried to see what he saw, and slowly, gradually, she began to understand. The way certain plants clustered, the slight depression in the land, the color of the soil. "There," she said, surprised. "There's water there." "Good." He sounded genuinely pleased. "You're learning." They reached the spot, and Nahuel dug into the rock hollow, with his hands scooping away sand until moisture appeared. He pressed cloth into the depression, let it soak, then squeezed the water into the drinking skin. It was slow, tedious work, but it meant survival. "Your turn," he said, handing her the cloth. She hesitated. "I don't learn. This desert kills the ignorant first. Not cruel, just fact. If something happens to me, you need to know how to find water, how to read the land, how to survive. Nothing's going to happen to you. Maybe not, but maybe is how people die out here." He watched her kneel, press the cloth into the damp sand. "Slower, gentle. You're asking the desert for help, not demanding it." She tried again, following his instruction. The cloth darkened, absorbing moisture. She squeezed it carefully into the skin, watching drops gather and fall. It felt like prayer, like communion with something older than churches. "Good," Nahuel said softly. "You're stronger than you think, Evelyn Whitmore." They traveled through the worst heat, which Evelyn thought insane, until Nahuel explained. "Most people rest during the day, move at night. We do the opposite, makes us harder to predict, harder to track." "And harder to survive?" She gasped, sweat streaming down her face. "That too." But there was something in his voice, almost amusement. "You want to go back to your comfortable life, back to tea parties and meaningless conversations. I can point you in the right direction. You'd be dead by nightfall, but at least you'd die civilized." "Is this how you teach everyone?" She was too tired to be properly angry. "Insult them until they're too stubborn to quit. Only the ones I think can handle it." He glanced back at her. "You're still here, aren't you?" She was. Against all logic, all reason, all the lessons of her upbringing that said she should collapse gracefully and wait for rescue, she was still walking, still fighting, still alive. On the second day, they ran into trouble. They'd stopped to rest in the shade of an overhang when Nahuel suddenly tensed his hand, moving to his rifle. "Down," he whispered. "Don't move." Evelyn froze. What? Riders, 2 of them, moving fast. She saw them then, distant figures against the horizon, not Apache, not cavalry either. These were the bounty hunters her father had hired. She recognized the type from San Francisco, men who came to collect debts and didn't ask questions about methods. They were close, too close. She could hear their horses now, the creak of leather, the low murmur of conversation. Her heart hammered so loud she was certain they'd hear it. Nahuel's hand found hers, squeezed once. A message: "Trust me. Stay still." The riders passed within 100 yards. One of them paused, scanning the rocks. Evelyn held her breath until her lungs screamed. The riders' eyes swept over their hiding place, moved on. They rode away slowly, methodically searching the landscape. Only when they were small dots in the distance did Nahuel relax. That was close. Will they come back? Eventually. They're being paid well enough to be thorough. He looked at her, something calculating in his eyes. "How much is your father offering for you?" "I don't know. Does it matter?" "It matters because it tells me how hard they'll look, how far they'll chase." He studied her face like he was reading text. "You really don't know, do you? don't know your own value in your father's ledger. I know I'm expensive to maintain and useful to marry off, she said, bitterness creeping into her voice. Beyond that, I've never asked what I'm worth, dead or alive. Well, Nahuel stood, offered his hand. I'd say at least 500, maybe 1,000 if he's feeling sentimental. He pulled her up. That's how many men die before they stop looking. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt oddly calm. Then we'd better make sure we're worth the effort to find. Nahuel actually smiled. That's the spirit. On the third day, he taught her to shoot. They'd made camp in a narrow canyon sheltered from both sun and eyes. Nahuel produced a revolver taken from the train she assumed, though she didn't ask. Time you learn to defend yourself, he said, pressing the gun into her hand. It was heavier than she expected. The weight of it felt wrong. Wrong, like holding something that didn't belong in her world. I can't. You can and you will. His hands covered hers, adjusting her grip. See that rock, the one with the white stripe? She nodded, acutely aware of his nearness, the warmth of his body behind hers, his breath stirring her hair. That's your target. Now hold it steady. Don't anticipate the recoil. Don't jerk the trigger. Breathe out slowly and squeeze. She tried. The gun barked, jumping in her hands. The shot went wide, kicking up dust a foot to the left of the rock. Again, Nahuel said patiently. His hands stayed on hers, steadying, guiding. You're fighting it. Don't fight it. Work with it. Control, not force. She breathed, aimed, fired. Closer this time, but still missed. Better, again. They went through it over and over, his instructions, a quiet litany in her ear. Breathe, aim, don't anticipate, squeeze, don't pull. His patience was infinite, his corrections gentle but firm. On the 7th shot, she hit the rock. A chip of stone flew off and she felt a surge of triumph so intense it shocked her. Good, Nahuel said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Again, make it consistent. The 8th shot hit, the 9th. By the 10th, she was hitting the rock more often than not. Her hands shook from the effort. Her ears rang from the shots, but she'd done it. She'd learned. That's enough for today, Nahuel said, finally taking the gun. You did well. I barely hit it half the time. Half the time is better than never, and half the time is enough to save your life, or mine. He checked the cylinder, reloaded carefully. Tomorrow we'll work on shooting while moving, the day after shooting while scared. He handed the gun back to her. Keep it. It's yours now. She stared at the weapon in her hand. A day ago, the thought of holding a gun would have horrified her. Now it felt like possibility, like a voice she hadn't known she could use. That night, as they sat by a carefully concealed fire, Nahuel asked, Do you regret it? Running. Evelyn considered the question. She thought about the train, about Marcus Thornhill and the life that had been planned for her, the silk prison her father had built. No, she said finally. I regret not running sooner. Nahuel looked at her for a long moment. You surprise me, Evelyn Whitmore. How most people in your position would be counting the hours until rescue, planning their return to civilization. You're not, are you? She met his eyes. What if I told you I don't want to be rescued? Then I'd say you're lying to yourself, or to me. But his voice was gentle. Everyone wants something, Evelyn. The question is what price you're willing to pay for it. What do you want? She asked. Really want? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. The fire crackled, throwing shadows across his face. I want my people to stop dying. I want the land thieves to choke on their papers and deeds. I want... He paused. I want one thing in this world, to be uncomplicated. One thing that isn't about survival or revenge or the slow death of everything I've loved. Am I complicated? The question came out softer than she intended. Catastrophically. But he said it almost fondly. You're the daughter of my enemy. You're leverage I should be using, not teaching to shoot. You're everything I should walk away from. He looked at her across the fire. And yet, here we are. Here we are, she echoed. The silence that fell between them felt heavy with things neither could say. Evelyn wondered what it meant that she felt safer in a desert with a wanted man than she ever had in her father's mansion. Wondered what it meant that when Nahuel's hand had covered hers while teaching her to shoot, she'd felt more seen, more real than in all her 23 years of being admired. On the fourth day, they reached Red Mesa Basin just as riders appeared on their back trail. Not 2 this time, 6, maybe more. They'd called in reinforcements. "Run," Nahuel said, his voice sharp with urgency. "The canyon. Now." They ran. Evelyn's lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she ran anyway. Behind them, shouts echoed off stone walls. A rifle cracked. The bullet hit rock near her head, spraying stone fragments that cut her cheek. "Don't stop," Nahuel yelled. "Whatever happens, don't stop." The canyon narrowed ahead, barely wide enough for one person. Nahuel shoved her through first, her shoulders scraping stone. She squeezed through into a wider chamber beyond. Nahuel followed, turning immediately to face the entrance, rifle raised. "Get behind me," he ordered. "No." Evelyn pulled out her gun, her hands surprisingly steady. "You taught me to shoot. Let me use it." "Evelyn, I'm not hiding anymore." She positioned herself beside him, back to the wall. "We do this together or not at all." He looked at her then, and something passed between them. Understanding, acceptance, trust. "Together then," he said quietly. The first rider appeared in the canyon entrance. Evelyn recognized him, one of her father's men, a brutal enforcer named Carson, who'd once broken a servant's arm for spilling wine. "Miss Whitmore," Carson called. "Your father's worried about you. Come on out. We'll take you home safe." "Liar," she called back, surprised by the strength in her voice. "I saw you shoot that woman at the train. I know what kind of safe you're offering." Carson's face hardened. "Have it your way." He raised his rifle. Nahuel fired first. Carson's hat flew off the bullet, passing close enough to part his hair. "Next one doesn't miss," Nahuel warned. More men crowded into the canyon entrance. Too many. Even with her and Nahuel shooting, they were outnumbered. "Last chance," another rider called. "Come out or we come in shooting." Evelyn looked at Nahuel. He looked back. In that moment, she saw her whole life compressed into a single choice. Go back to her father's world, to Marcus Thornhill, to the slow death of living a life chosen by others, or stay here with this man who'd taught her to survive, to shoot, to choose her own destruction. "I'm not going back," she said, clearly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I'm not a hostage. I'm not kidnapped. I'm exactly where I choose to be." The silence that followed felt like thunder. Then Carson laughed, harsh and ugly. "Your choice, girl, but you're choosing to die." "Maybe," Evelyn said, "but at least I'm choosing." She raised her gun, aimed the way Nahuel had taught her. Breathe, steady, squeeze, and fired. The shot took Carson in the shoulder, spinning him around. He went down cursing. All hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space. Evelyn and Nahuel fired back, taking cover behind rocks. She didn't think, just moved on instinct and training. Load, aim, fire, reload, again. One rider fell, then another. The others pulled back, regrouping. "How many bullets do you have left?" Nahuel asked, his voice tight. 4, maybe 5. "Not enough." He scanned the canyon walls, calculating. "When I say run, you run. Don't argue. Don't wait for me. Just run." "No, I told you we do this. Evelyn." He looked at her, his eyes holding something she'd never seen before, something raw and honest and terrifying in its intensity. "I will not watch you die for my choices. Do you understand? I can't." He stopped, jaw clenching. "Just promise me you'll run." Before she could answer, the riders charged. But this time they were smarter. They came from two sides, splitting their fire. Nahuel took down one, but another got through. Evelyn fired, missed, fired again. The man stumbled, but kept coming. Then Nahuel was there, tackling the rider, the two of them crashing to the ground in a tangle of fists and fury. Evelyn watched in horror as they fought brutal and close. The rider pulled a knife. Nahuel blocked, twisted. There was a sound like wet canvas tearing. The rider stopped moving. Nahuel stood slowly, blood on his hands, not all his own. He looked at her, his face unreadable. You should go, while you can. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when I pulled that trigger, she said steadily, when I chose you over them. Or did you think I didn't understand what that meant? You don't know what you're choosing. You're running on fear and adrenaline and what love? The word hung between them like a dare. Is that what you're afraid of? That maybe this isn't just about survival anymore? Nahuel stared at her. In the distance they could hear the riders regrouping, preparing for another assault. They had minutes, maybe less. We need to move, he said finally, not answering her question, or maybe answering it in the only way he could. They ran again deeper into Red Mesa, into canyons that twisted like veins through stone. Behind them, pursuit echoed. Ahead, the desert stretched endless and unforgiving, and between them something unspoken grew, like fire in dry grass, dangerous, necessary, impossible to extinguish. As they ran, Evelyn realized she'd stopped counting the days since the train. Stopped thinking about rescue or return. The woman who'd boarded that train in San Francisco, afraid, passive-owned, was gone, dead as surely as if that bullet had found its mark. And the woman running beside Nahuel, through the desert, gun in hand and blood on her dress, was someone entirely new, someone she was just beginning to know, someone who scared her and thrilled her in equal measure, someone free. The sun hung low and angry over Red Mesa Pass when the world finally caught up with them. They'd been running for 8 days straight, living on jerky and hope, sleeping in shifts with weapons loaded. Evelyn's hands had calloused over her skin, darkened by sun and wind, until she looked more like the desert than the ballroom she'd once inhabited. The gun at her hip felt natural now, an extension of her will rather than a foreign object. They'd almost believed they'd made it. Almost convinced themselves that the pursuit had given up, that the desert had swallowed their trail. That was their first mistake. Hope makes you careless. Nahuel saw them first. He'd been scouting ahead while Evelyn rested in the shadow of a red stone formation when he came running back, his face tight, with something she'd learned to recognize as controlled fear. How many? She asked, already checking her ammunition. All of them. He crouched beside her, breathing hard. Carson brought everyone. 10 riders, maybe 12. They've got us boxed in. Mesa wall behind us, open ground on 3 sides. He met her eyes. This is bad, Evelyn. This is as bad as it gets. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But another part, the part that had learned to shoot to survive, to choose her own fate, felt almost calm. Then we make them regret finding us. They're not here to negotiate. Nahuel checked his rifle, his movements precise, despite the urgency. Your father must have doubled the bounty. These men won't stop until we're dead, or they are. Good. The word surprised her with its venom. I'm tired of running from my father's mistakes. Nahuel looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. You know, if we survive this, there's no going back. They'll call you traitor. Savages, woman. Every door that was open to you will slam shut. Those doors were never really open, she said quietly. They were just prettier cages. She stood dusting off her ruined dress. Where do you want me? He pointed to an outcropping of rocks that formed a natural barricade. There, you'll have cover and a clear line of sight. I'll be over there flanking. We create a crossfire, make them think there's more of us than there are. And if they rush us, then we make every bullet count and hope the desert finishes what we start. He pulled something from his pack, a leather cord with a small turquoise stone. Here, my sister's. For luck. Evelyn took it, feeling the weight of what he wasn't saying. Nahuel, don't. His voice was rough. Don't say anything that sounds like goodbye. We're not done yet. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that she understood now what had been building between them these 8 days of survival and starlight, that somewhere between teaching her to shoot and trusting her to watch his back. Something had shifted, that the word she'd thrown at him before love hadn't been just adrenaline talking, but there wasn't time. The riders were coming. She could see dust rising in the distance, hear the thunder of hooves growing closer. Evelyn, Nahuel caught her hand squeezed once. Whatever happens, you made your choice. That matters. You understand. You're not a victim anymore. You're a warrior. Then he was gone, moving to his position with that fluid grace she'd come to associate with survival itself. Evelyn settled behind her, Rock's gun steady in her hands. She could see them now, Carson in the lead, his shoulder bandaged where her bullet had found him. The others spread out behind him, professional, methodical. These weren't ranch hands playing bounty hunter. These were killers who knew their business. They stopped just out of rifle range. Carson cupped his hands around his mouth. Miss Whitmore, last chance. Come out peacefully. We'll tell your father you were coerced. No shame in it. But stay with that Apache and you die with him. Simple as that. Nothing about this is simple, she called back, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. You're here to kill us both. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise. Carson's laugh echoed off the rocks. Smart girl, smarter than your daddy gave you credit for. He raised his hand. Your choice then. Boys, take them both. Dead's worth just as much as alive at this point. The riders spread out, beginning their approach. Evelyn's finger found the trigger, her breath steady despite her hammering heart. She thought of her father's study, where she'd overheard him telling Marcus Thornhill that daughters were investments that paid dividends. She thought of the train of her life measured in silk and submission. She thought of Nahuel's hand covering hers, teaching her that control came from within, not without. She thought of freedom and what it cost. The first rider broke into a run. Nahuel's rifle cracked and the man went down screaming, clutching his leg. Not a kill shot, a message. Stop or we will. They didn't stop. Two more rushed forward using the fallen man as cover. Evelyn aimed, breathed out slowly, squeezed. Her bullet caught one in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell but kept crawling, determined. Another shot from Nahuel finished it. She's shooting, one of the riders yelled, genuine surprise in his voice. The girl's actually shooting at us. Then shoot back, Carson snarled. She made her choice. Bullets began to fly. Rock exploded near Evelyn's head, showering her with stone fragments. She ducked, waited, popped up, and fired again. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled her lungs. Her ears rang. Time compressed and stretched, seconds becoming hours, minutes becoming heartbeats. A rider made it within 20 yards of her position. She could see his eyes, see the grim determination there. He raised his rifle. She fired first. The bullet took him in the chest, and he went down like a puppet with cut strings. She'd killed him, actually killed him. She waited for horror, for guilt, for anything. What came instead was cold clarity. This was survival. This was the price of her choice. More came. She fired until her gun clicked empty, then reloaded with shaking hands. Nahuel was still shooting his rifle, a steady rhythm of death. But there were too many. Even as bodies fell, more pushed forward. They were going to be overrun. Nahuel, she screamed. We need to... The explosion cut her off. For a confused moment, she thought someone had brought dynamite. Then she realized Nahuel had triggered something. The rocks above the pass, carefully prepared during the night, when she'd thought he was just scouting. He'd been setting a trap. Boulders cascaded down an avalanche of stone and dust. Men screamed, horses shrieked. The avalanche caught 3 riders, crushing them beneath tons of red rock. The others scattered, their formation broken, their assault shattered. In the chaos, Nahuel was moving. She saw him dart from cover, firing as he ran, using the confusion. He made it to her position, sliding in beside her behind the rocks. That won't hold them long, he gasped, breathing hard. Blood streaked his face from a cut above his eye. But it evens the odds. How many left? 5, maybe 6. He reloaded quickly, efficiently. Carson's still alive. I saw him pull back. Then we end this. Evelyn checked her own ammunition. 4 bullets left. No more running. No more running, he agreed. The dust settled slowly, revealing the carnage. Bodies lay twisted among the rocks. One horse stood riderless, trembling. The survivors had taken cover, regrouping. She could hear them arguing, their confidence shaken but not broken. "They'll rush us," Nahuel said. "All at once. One final push. Will we hold?" He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw everything he'd never said. "I don't know, but if these are my last moments, I'm glad you're here. Glad I didn't leave you on that train." "Nahuel." She wanted to say it, needed to say it, but before the words could form, Carson's voice rang out. "Nahuel, Apache warrior, Carlisle graduate, wanted in 3 territories." Carson had moved to a position where they could see him, hands visible, weaponless. "I know who you are, know your story. You're a survivor, smart, practical." He paused. "So let's be practical. Give me the girl. Keep the bounty on yourself. You'll get away clean while we deal with her. Start fresh somewhere else." Evelyn's blood ran cold, not at the offer, but at the silence that followed. 1 heartbeat, 2. She looked at Nahuel, saw him calculating, weighing odds. "He's right," she said quietly. "You could." No. The word was absolute. Not for all the gold in California, not for my freedom, not for my life. He raised his voice so Carson could hear. "She's not a bargaining chip. She's not property to trade. And if the world wants to tear us apart, then let it come. I will not let her go." Something broke open in Evelyn's chest, something that had been locked and guarded for 23 years. She understood now what she'd been running toward all along. Not freedom from her father, not escape from Marcus Thornhill, but this moment of being chosen, of being valued not for her utility, but for herself. "You stupid bastard," Carson yelled. "You're throwing your life away for a white woman who'll betray you the first chance she gets." "She had her chance," Nahuel called back. "She chose to shoot instead. That's all I need to know." "Then you die together. Romantic, stupid, but romantic." Carson raised his hand. "All at once, boys. End this." They came in a rush. 5 men, maybe 6, firing as they ran. It was suicide tactics, desperation, and anger overriding sense. But it was also overwhelming. Too many targets, too little ammunition. Evelyn fired, reloaded, fired again. Beside her, Nahuel's rifle spoke its own language of lead and death. 1 rider fell, then another, but still they came. 30 yards, 20. She could see their faces now, see the hate there. A bullet caught Nahuel. She heard his grunt of pain, saw him stagger. "No." She was at his side, instantly seeing blood bloom through his shirt, high on the left side of his ribs. "I'm fine," he gasped, but he wasn't. The rifle fell from his hands. "Keep shooting." She fired at the advancing men, tears streaming down her face. 2 bullets left. 1, the last. She made each one count, but it wasn't enough. They were going to die here in the red dust, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Then something strange happened. The remaining riders stopped. Just stopped, in the middle of their charge, looking at something behind Evelyn and Nahuel. She risked a glance. Riders. At least 20 of them appearing from the mesa like ghosts. Apache warriors painted for war weapons ready. They'd surrounded the whole pass without anyone noticing. At their head rode an older man, his face weathered as stone, his eyes holding the weight of decades. He looked at Nahuel, then at Evelyn, then at the carnage around them. "So," he said in accented English, "this is the woman worth dying for." Nahuel tried to stand, failed, settled for straightening despite the blood. "Uncle, I can explain what that you've brought war to our doorstep, that you've aligned yourself with the daughter of men who steal our land." The older man's voice was hard as flint. "That you would die for a white woman while our people starve. She's not." Nahuel coughed, blood flecking his lips. "She's not her father. She chose to fight beside me, to To what save you? Does she know what you've cost us, what her presence here will bring? The old man gestured at the dead bounty hunters. These men will be found. Their deaths will bring soldiers, cavalry. Our home will become a battlefield because you couldn't resist playing savior. Evelyn stepped forward, placing herself between Nahuel and his uncle. She was acutely aware of how she must look filthy bloodied, holding a white man's gun, but she held the older man's gaze. I am Evelyn Whitmore, she said clearly. Daughter of Charles Whitmore, yes, but not his creature, not anymore. She lifted her gun, emptied the remaining bullet into the dirt at her feet. I killed men today, men my father sent. I chose Nahuel over everything I was raised to be. If that brings war, then the war was already coming. Don't blame him for refusing to let me die. The old man studied her with eyes that had seen too much, survived too much. Pretty words, but words are cheap. What happens when this wears off? When you remember silk dresses and soft beds? When you realize what you've given up? Then I'll mourn it, Evelyn said simply. But I won't go back. I can't. That woman is dead. Your nephew made sure I survived, and in surviving I became someone new, someone who won't apologize for choosing life over comfort. Silence fell like snow. The Apache warriors watched, their faces unreadable. Carson and his remaining men stood frozen, caught between two forces, uncertain which would kill them first. Finally, Nahuel's uncle spoke. The council will decide. They will hear your story and judge whether you're worth the war you bring. He looked at Nahuel, something almost like grief in his eyes. You've changed, nephew. Carlyle didn't break you, but perhaps this woman will. She didn't break me, Nahuel said softly. She reminded me what's worth fighting for. The old man grunted, then gestured to the bounty hunters. These ones leave. Tell Whitmore his daughter is beyond his reach now. Tell him the Apache do not return what chooses to stay. He raised his voice. But tell him also one more deed, one more theft, one more betrayal, and the next men he sends will not leave alive. Carson stared, uncomprehending. You're letting us go. We're letting you carry a message. There's a difference. The old man's smile was cold. Run fast. My patience is thinner than my mercy. They ran. Carson and his surviving men scrambled for their horses and fled like the devil himself was chasing them. Maybe he was. Maybe they'd seen something in those Apache warriors' eyes that promised death was only being postponed, not pardoned. When they were gone, warriors surrounded Evelyn and Nahuel, not threatening but not welcoming either. The old man dismounted, approaching slowly. Let me see, he said, kneeling beside Nahuel. It's not bad, Nahuel protested. You're bleeding like a stuck pig. Let me see. He pulled aside Nahuel's shirt, examining the wound. Clean through, missed the lung. You're lucky or blessed, and I'm not sure which. He began binding it with practiced efficiency, then looked at Evelyn. You did this. No, I. She wrapped my first wound. Nahuel interrupted. Days ago, different fight, she's... He trailed off, searching for words. She's trouble, his uncle finished. Beautiful trouble, but trouble nonetheless. He tied off the bandage, stood. The council meets at sunset. Both of you will answer for this. For bringing war, for choosing each other over wisdom. He paused. For love, if that's what this is. It is, Nahuel said. No hesitation, no doubt. Evelyn felt the words hit her chest like a physical thing. He'd said it, actually said it. In front of his uncle, his people, everyone. Not a declaration in the heat of battle, but a statement of fact, simple and devastating. Then you're both fools, the old man said, but there was something in his voice. Not quite approval, but not quite condemnation either. Love doesn't stop bullets, doesn't feed the hungry, doesn't return stolen land. No, Evelyn agreed, but it's worth fighting for anyway, isn't it? Otherwise, what are we fighting for at all? The old man looked at her for a long moment. You speak like someone who's learned hard truths recently. I speak like someone who's tired of lies, she corrected. Even beautiful ones. That earned her something that might have been respect. The old man mounted his horse, gestured for his warriors to help Nahuel. Two of them moved forward, supporting him between them. Evelyn moved to follow, but one of the warriors blocked her path. Uncle, Nahuel called out, pain making his voice tight. She stays with me, or I don't move. You're in no position to make demands, nephew. Then I guess I'm making them anyway. Despite the pain, despite the blood loss, Nahuel's voice held steel. She fought beside me, bled beside me. If my people can't see that as worthy of respect, then maybe I'm fighting for the wrong things. The tension stretched taut as bowstring. Finally, the old man nodded once sharp. The warrior stepped aside, letting Evelyn pass. She moved to Nahuel's side, taking his weight despite her own exhaustion. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, he murmured back. If the council decides against us, we'll both wish. Carson had finished what he started. They rode toward the Apache camp, the setting sun turning the desert to blood and gold. Behind them, the bodies of bounty hunters would be left for the vultures. A message written in death that some borders couldn't be crossed, some choices couldn't be undone. Ahead lay judgment, not from courts or laws or her father's empire, but from a people who'd been betrayed so many times that trust was a currency more precious than gold. Evelyn had never been so terrified, had never felt more alive. Nahuel's hand found hers as they rode, his fingers lacing through hers, despite the warrior's watching eyes. It was a small rebellion, a tiny declaration of defiance against everyone who said they shouldn't exist together. But small rebellions, Evelyn had learned, were how revolutions started. The Apache camp materialized from the landscape like it had grown there, hide dwellings and cook fires, blending seamlessly with rock and sage. Women looked up from their work. Children stopped playing warriors, paused mid-conversation, all of them staring at her. The white woman, the banker's daughter, the enemy. Nahuel's uncle dismounted at the largest dwelling, spoke briefly with someone inside, then turned to them. The council will hear you at moonrise. Until then, you rest, you eat, you prepare your words carefully. His eyes found Evelyn's. Choose them very carefully, girl. Your life and his depend on what you say next. They were led to a small dwelling at the edge of camp. Not quite exile, but not welcomed either. A woman brought food, pemmican, and water, setting it down without meeting Evelyn's eyes. When they were alone, Nahuel collapsed onto the buffalo hide, bedding his face gray with pain and blood loss. Let me see, Evelyn said, moving to his side. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. She began unwrapping the bandage, examining the wound. It was bad, not fatal if treated properly, but bad enough. This needs to be cleaned better. Do they have Evelyn? His hand caught hers. Whatever happens tonight, whatever they decide, I need you to know something. Don't. Her voice shook. Don't say anything that sounds like goodbye. We've had enough of those. Then let me say this. He pulled her down until she was sitting beside him, their faces close. I meant what I said, about not letting you go, about this being love. I've had 8 days to understand it, to fight it, to try and convince myself it was just survival instinct or misplaced heroism. He paused, his eyes holding hers. It wasn't. It isn't. You could go back right now, walk out of here, return to your father, and I would still love you, still remember you, still believe saving you was the best thing I ever did. Tears tracked down Evelyn's face, cutting clean lines through the dust. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. Don't you understand? I chose you. Not just in that canyon when I fired at Carson, but every moment since, every step, every sunrise, I chose you. Then choose me one more time. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away tears. Choose me in front of the council. Choose me when they ask why you're here, what you want, what price you'll pay. Choose me even when it means losing everything else. There's nothing else to lose, she said. Just you, just this, just us. and then because words weren't enough and might never be enough. She kissed him. It was clumsy and desperate and tasted like blood and dust and freedom. His hand tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, despite the pain it must have caused. They kissed like people drowning, like people saved, like people who'd found something worth dying for in a world that wanted them dead. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nahuel smiled. Actually smiled. That's going to complicate the council hearing. Good, Evelyn said fiercely. Let them see. Let them all see. I'm not ashamed of choosing you. Outside, the sun finished dying and the moon began its rise. Soon they would face judgment. Soon they would learn if love was enough or if the weight of history and hate would crush them both. But for now, in this moment stolen from fate, they held each other and pretended the world couldn't touch them, pretended that choosing each other was enough to rewrite the story the world had written for them. They were wrong, of course. The world always finds a way to collect its debts. But sometimes in those brief moments of defiance before the bill comes due, people find something worth paying for. And Evelyn Whitmore, who'd once measured her worth in silk and diamonds, had finally found something priceless. The moon was high when they came for them. 3 warriors with faces carved from stone and eyes that revealed nothing. Nahuel rose carefully, his hand pressed to his bandaged ribs, and Evelyn stood beside him. They'd cleaned themselves as best they could, but there was no hiding what they were: bloodied, exhausted, and bound together by something that defied every law and custom that mattered. The council fire burned in the center of camp, surrounded by elders whose weathered faces held the collective memory of a people being slowly erased. Nahuel's uncle sat at the center, flanked by others whose names Evelyn didn't know, but whose judgment she could feel like a physical weight. Women and warriors formed a wider circle, witnesses to whatever came next. They were led to stand before the fire. The heat of it felt like accusation, like the flames themselves were waiting to consume them if the council's words didn't first. Nahuel's uncle spoke first, his voice carrying to every corner of the gathering. Nahuel, son of my brother who died fighting the Bluecoats, student of the white man's schools, warrior who swore to protect our people. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. You have brought the daughter of our enemy into our midst, brought war to our doorstep, killed white men who will be mourned and avenged. Explain yourself. Nahuel straightened despite his pain. When he spoke, his voice was steady, clear. I saved her because leaving her would have stained my spirit. I kept her because she proved herself worthy of survival. I brought her here because everywhere else wanted us dead. He looked around the circle. And yes, I brought war, but the war was already coming. It's been coming since the first deed was signed, the first treaty broken, the first child taken to their schools. I just stopped pretending we could avoid it by being invisible. Bold words from a man who chose a white woman over his people. An elder woman said, her voice sharp as obsidian. You speak of honor, but where is the honor in betraying your blood for a stranger? I didn't betray anyone, Nahuel said quietly. I chose to see a person instead of a symbol. Chose humanity over hate. If that's betrayal, then maybe we've already lost what we're fighting for. The murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind through grass, some angry, some thoughtful. Evelyn felt every eye on her, measuring, judging, finding her wanting before she'd even spoken. And you, another elder turned his gaze to Evelyn, daughter of the banker, daughter of the men who sign papers that steal our children's future. What do you say for yourself? Why should we not return you to your father in pieces as a message about property he cannot own? Evelyn's throat was dry as bone. She'd rehearsed speeches in her head, practiced words that might save them, but standing here in the firelight surrounded by the weight of justified rage and historical grief, all her prepared words felt like lies. So she told the truth instead. I can't defend my father, she said, her voice carrying despite her fear. I can't stand here and claim ignorance about what he's done, what men like him have done. I lived in luxury built on theft, wore dresses paid for with land that wasn't his to sell. She paused, forcing herself to meet the eyes around her. But I can tell you this, the woman who boarded that train is dead. She died the moment Nahuel pulled her into the desert and taught her that survival matters more than comfort, that choosing yourself is an act of rebellion, that love, real love, means standing beside someone even when the whole world says you shouldn't. Love. The word came from Nahuel's eyes dripping with skepticism. You speak of love. What do you know of love, girl? You've known my nephew for 8 days. 8 days of running and fear and adrenaline. That's not love. That's desperation dressed up in prettier clothing. Maybe, Evelyn admitted, or maybe love is choosing someone every day, even when you have reason not to. Maybe it's learning to shoot so you can protect them. Maybe it's wrapping their wounds with your own hands and knowing you'd take the bullet instead if you could. Her voice strengthened. I don't know all your words for love, but I know what I feel, and I know that when Carson offered to let Nahuel go free, if he gave me up, he refused. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of love we're talking about. It tells me he's a fool, the elder woman said, but there was less sharpness in her voice now. Love doesn't feed children, doesn't stop soldiers, doesn't— No, Evelyn interrupted, then caught herself. Forgive me, but no. Love doesn't stop soldiers, but it's why we fight them. It's why any of this matters. Otherwise, we're just surviving, not living. And what's the point of surviving if we lose everything that makes survival worthwhile? Silence fell like a stone into water. The fire crackled and popped. Somewhere in the camp, a child cried and was quickly hushed. Evelyn waited for judgment, for condemnation, for the words that would end this. Instead, Nahuel's uncle stood. You speak well, better than I expected. He walked around the fire studying them both. But speaking well and living well are different things. You say you choose him. You say the woman you were is dead. Prove it. How? Evelyn asked. Stay. The word was a challenge. Stay here with us. Live as we live. Work as we work. Learn our ways. Prove that this isn't just the romantic delusion of a girl running from her father. He stopped in front of her. Prove you can survive being Apache when the shine wears off and you remember what you gave up. Uncle, Nahuel began, I'm not finished. The old man's voice cut like a knife. You brought her here. She's your responsibility. But understand this, if she falters, if she runs, if she proves herself weak, it reflects on you. On your judgment, on your worthiness to stand among us. He looked back at Evelyn. And you, girl, if you stay, you accept all of it. The hunger when game is scarce, the cold when winter comes, the fear when soldiers ride close, the knowledge that your presence makes us targets. You accept it all, or you leave now. Choose. Evelyn looked at Nahuel. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Hope and fear mixed together, the look of someone who wants something so badly, they're terrified to reach for it. She thought about San Francisco, about silk and silver and rooms that smelled like roses, about a life where the hardest choice was which dress to wear. Then she thought about the desert sunrise, about calloused hands and straight shooting, about running barefoot through sand and learning to read water signs in stone, about Nahuel's hand on hers teaching her to survive. I choose to stay, she said. The council deliberated for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Evelyn and Nahuel were sent back to their dwelling to wait. They sat in the darkness, not speaking, his hand finding hers like an anchor in a storm. You can still leave, he said finally. No one would blame you. Would you? No, but I'd understand. Then you don't know me as well as you think. She squeezed his hand. I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere. It won't be easy. My uncle meant every word. They'll test you, push you, wait for you to break. Then I won't break. She turned to face him in the darkness. I survived 8 days in the desert, learning to be someone new. I can survive this. I hope you're right, he said softly. because I don't know what I'll do if you're not." Before she could answer, the entrance flap opened. Nahuel's uncle stood silhouetted against the firelight. "The council has decided you may stay, both of you, but there are conditions." "Name them," Nahuel said. "The girl works, proves her value beyond being your companion. She learns our language, our ways. She earns her place here, not claims it through you." He paused. "And you, nephew, heal, then scout. Your father's people need to know what's coming, because make no mistake, what happened at Red Mesa Pass won't be the end. The bounty hunters will report back. The soldiers will come. We need to be ready." "I understand," Nahuel said. "Do you—" His uncle's voice was harsh. "Do you understand that by bringing her here, you may have doomed us all, that love, if that's what this is, might cost us everything?" "Yes," Nahuel said simply. "I understand, and I'd make the same choice again." His uncle was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, more like recognition of something inevitable and tragic. "You really are your father's son. He chose your mother even when her clan said no, even when it meant exile. He chose love over wisdom too." He turned to go, then paused. "He died happy, though. Remember that. When the soldiers come, when the price comes due, remember that at least he died happy." Then he was gone, leaving them alone with the weight of his words and the knowledge that their choice had consequences far beyond themselves. The weeks that followed were harder than anything Evelyn had imagined. She woke before dawn to work alongside the women, grinding corn, tanning hides, tasks that left her hands blistered and bleeding. The women didn't speak to her much at first, their silence more cutting than any words. She was an outsider, a white woman, the banker's daughter playing at being Apache. But she didn't quit. Every morning she rose and worked. Every evening she collapsed exhausted, and slowly, grudgingly, the wall began to crack. An older woman named Kaya showed her how to properly scrape a hide without ruining it. A younger one, Nita, taught her words in their language, laughing at Evelyn's pronunciation, but correcting it gently. Children who'd initially hidden from her began to watch with curiosity as she worked, this strange, pale woman who looked like their enemies but moved among them like she belonged. Nahuel healed slowly, his wound knitting together under Kaya's careful tending. When he was strong enough, he began to scout, disappearing for days at a time and returning with news that grew darker each time. Soldiers were moving, patrols increasing. Her father had evidently made good on his promise to find her, and the territorial governor was using it as excuse to increase military presence. "They're calling you the captured heiress," Nahuel told her one night as they sat outside their dwelling, "saying I kidnapped you, that you're being held against your will." "Of course they are," Evelyn said, her hands busy with the basket she was learning to weave. "The truth would complicate their narrative. Easier to paint you as savage and me as victim than admit I chose this." "Does it bother you being called victim?" She considered the question, her fingers working the willow strips. "It used to. Now I think it's funny. I was more of a victim in my father's house than I've ever been here. There I was property. Here I'm just me." "Just you," he echoed, something warm in his voice. "Is that enough?" She looked at him, this man who'd saved her by teaching her to save herself. "It's everything." But even as she said it, she knew the peace wouldn't last. Couldn't last. And she was right. It came on a cold morning 2 months after Red Mesa Pass. Runners arrived at dawn, breathless and wild-eyed. Soldiers, a full company of cavalry riding hard for the camp. And leading them, coordinating them, was Carson. The bastard hadn't given up, had convinced the army that he knew where the kidnapped heiress was being held, had painted himself as a righteous hero instead of the hired killer he actually was. The camp erupted into controlled chaos. Women and children packed essential supplies. Warriors gathered weapons. The elderly began the grim task of preparing for either flight or fight. And through it all, Evelyn felt the weight of every eye. This was her fault. Her father's money. Her existence. She'd brought this war to their doorstep exactly as they'd feared. Nahuel found her standing alone at the edge of camp, staring at the horizon, where dust rose like a stain against the sky. "We need to go," he said quietly. "No." The word came out hard, certain. "I need to go. The rest of you need to scatter, hide, survive. They're here for me. Let me end this." "Are you insane?" He grabbed her shoulders, turning her to face him. "You walk out there. Carson kills you. Claims you died in the rescue attempt. Your father gets his martyr, the army gets its victory, and I—" His voice cracked. "I lose you. No, absolutely not. Nahuel. No." His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "We've come too far, survived too much. I will not watch you sacrifice yourself for a peace that won't last anyway. If they want war, then war is what they'll get. But we face it together. This isn't your fight." "The hell it isn't." His voice was fierce, almost angry. "You're my woman. You chose my people. That makes it my fight as much as yours. More even. Because I'm the one who dragged you into this desert and taught you that survival matters. And I'll be damned if I let you forget that lesson now." Behind them, Nahuel's uncle appeared. "The scouts report they're an hour out, maybe less. We don't have time for tender arguments." He looked at them both, his face grim. "The council agrees. We don't run anymore. We've run for 100 years, and the white men just keep coming. So here now, we make a stand. Not for territory, not for pride, but because sometimes you have to draw a line and say no further. You do not pass." "This will mean war," Nahuel said. "We're already at war, have been since the first white man called our land his and our children savages. We just stopped pretending otherwise." The old man's eyes found Evelyn's. "You wanted to prove yourself. Here's your chance. Fight beside us or run, but choose fast. The choosing time is almost over." Evelyn thought about running, about walking out to meet Carson and the soldiers, giving herself up, ending this, before more people died for her choices. It would be noble, sacrificial, the kind of romantic ending songs were written about. It would also be a lie. Because the truth was, she didn't want to die nobly, didn't want to sacrifice herself for a peace that was never really peace, just slow defeat dressed up in treaties and lies. She wanted to fight, wanted to stand beside Nahuel and his people and say no further. "This is where we make our stand." "I fight," she said. "Teach me what to do." What followed was preparation for war. The women who'd taught Evelyn to weave baskets now taught her to make bullets count. The children who'd watched her work now helped her dig firing positions and gather stones. The warriors who'd viewed her with suspicion now included her in their plans, not as equal, not yet, but as someone who'd earned the right to defend what she'd claimed. Nahuel armed her with a rifle, this time better than the pistol, showed her how to sight down the barrel, how to lead a moving target, how to breathe through fear and focus on the shot. His hands covered hers like they had that first time learning to shoot, but now there was a grim finality to it. "If this goes wrong," he started, "it won't. If it does," he insisted, "you take a horse and ride north. Don't stop until you reach the Colorado settlements. They won't know you there. You can start over." "Without you," she turned in his arms to face him. "That's not starting over. That's just a different kind of death." "Evelyn, no." She kissed him hard and desperate, tasting fear and determination. "We do this together or not at all. You taught me that. You don't get to take it back now." The soldiers came with the morning sun at their backs, a tactical advantage that put the Apache in shadow and silhouette. Carson rode at the front beside a cavalry captain, pointing, directing, playing his role as rescuer. They approached cautiously but confidently, a full company of armed men against what they assumed was a small band of raiders. They had no idea what waited for them. Nahuel's uncle had chosen the ground carefully. The camp sat in a natural bowl surrounded by rocks and ridges that offered perfect cover. The soldiers would have to advance uphill into prepared positions, every step costing them advantage. It was a killing ground disguised as vulnerability. The captain raised a white flag. "We're here for Miss Evelyn Whitmore," he called, his voice carrying across the distance. "Release her peacefully and we withdraw. No bloodshed, no retribution. You have my word." "Liar," Nahuel muttered beside Evelyn. They were positioned on the eastern ridge, their rifles trained on the mass of blue below. "The moment they have you, they'll attack anyway. Call it a rescue gone wrong." "I know." Evelyn's finger rested on the trigger, steady despite her racing heart. "So we don't give them the chance." Nahuel's uncle stepped into view, standing tall and unafraid, despite the rifles pointed his direction. "The woman stays. She is not your prisoner to rescue. She is Apache now, chosen and choosing. You want her, you go through us." Carson spurred his horse forward. "That's kidnapping. That's a hanging offense. You're signing your death warrants." "We signed those the day we were born, red in a white man's world," the old man called back. "At least this way we choose how the story ends." The captain raised his hand, and Evelyn knew with cold certainty that this was it. The moment where words failed and bullets spoke. She thought about her father, wondered if he'd even care that she was about to die defending people he'd never see as human. Thought about Marcus Thornhill, who'd probably marry someone else within a month and never think of her again. Thought about the life she'd left behind, the cages she'd escaped, and found she had no regrets. None. Whatever came next, she'd chosen it. That had to count for something. "Fire!" the captain shouted. The world exploded into chaos. The soldiers opened up with repeating rifles, a withering barrage that turned the air into screaming metal. But the Apache had prepared. They fired from cover, picking targets, making every shot count. Soldiers fell from their horses. Others scrambled for cover that didn't exist. Evelyn sighted down her rifle, found Carson in the chaos. He was dismounted now, using his horse as cover, shouting orders and firing. She breathed out slowly, the way Nahuel had taught her. Squeezed. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. Carson's hat flew off and he ducked, realizing he was targeted. Their eyes met across the battlefield. She saw his face twist with recognition and rage. The banker's daughter was shooting at him. The victim was fighting back. She fired again. This time the bullet hit his horse. The animal screamed and went down, pinning Carson's leg beneath it. He was trapped, exposed, and she had him sighted. "Evelyn," Nahuel said quietly beside her, "your choice." She could end it. Right now, pull the trigger and Carson would die, justice delivered for all the people he'd killed, all the lies he'd told. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but she didn't fire. "If I kill him, I'm what they say I am," she said, lowering the rifle slightly. "A savage, a murderer, someone who gave up civilization for bloodlust." She looked at Nahuel. "I want to be better than that, better than him, better than my father. Is that naive?" "Maybe," Nahuel said. "But it's also human, and that matters more." The battle raged for less than an hour, though it felt like days. The soldiers, realizing they were in a killing zone, began to retreat. The Apache let them go, not pursuing, not finishing what they'd started. It wasn't mercy exactly, more like acknowledgement. Today's victory was tomorrow's retribution. The cycle continued. When it was over, 7 soldiers lay dead. Twice that many wounded. The Apache had lost 2 warriors and 1 child caught by a stray bullet while helping move supplies. The price of war paid in blood that wouldn't wash clean. Carson was pulled from under his dead horse by his surviving men, loaded onto a wagon and carried away. Before they left, he looked back at the camp, at Evelyn standing tall on the ridge, rifle in hand. Their eyes met one last time. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, just held his gaze until he looked away, defeated not by bullets, but by the knowledge that she'd chosen to let him live. That she realized was power, real power. Not the kind her father wielded with money and influence, but the kind that came from choosing mercy when vengeance was easier. As the soldiers retreated into the distance, Nahuel's uncle approached them. He looked tired, older than he had that morning. "You fought well," he said to Evelyn. "Both of you." "It's not over," Nahuel said. "They'll be back, with more men, more guns." "I know." The old man stared at the horizon where dust marked the soldiers' retreat. "But maybe that's not the point anymore. Maybe the point is that we stood, that we said no further. That matters even if we lose in the end." "Do we lose?" Evelyn asked. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the accumulated grief of a people watching their world disappear. In the long run, probably. The white men have numbers and guns, and the righteousness of people who think God ordained their conquest. We have land they want and pride they can't break. The math doesn't favor us. He paused. But today we won. And sometimes today is all you get. That night the camp held no celebration, just quiet mourning and the grim satisfaction of survival. Evelyn and Nahuel sat outside their dwelling watching stars emerge like witnesses to what they'd done and what it cost. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Saving me that day on the train." Nahuel was quiet for a long moment. "Every damn day," he said finally. Then he took her hand. "And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. That's what makes it complicated. I brought war to my people, but I also found something worth fighting for beyond just survival. I don't know which matters more." "Maybe both," Evelyn offered. "Maybe that's what makes us human instead of just fighters. We can hold two truths at once. This was my fault. And I'd make the same choices again. Both are true." "You sound like my uncle. Is that a compliment?" "From me, yes." He pulled her closer and she rested her head on his shoulder, careful of his still healing wound. "The council's talking about moving, going deeper into the territory where the soldiers can't follow easily, starting over somewhere they haven't stolen yet. And us, we go with them if you want." He paused. "Or we could leave, head west to California or north to Canada, disappear, start new lives where no one knows who we are or what we've done." Evelyn considered it, imagined a life where she and Nahuel could just be not symbols, not problems, not the couple that started a war, just two people trying to love each other in peace. But peace felt like cowardice now, like running after they'd claimed the right to stand. "We stay," she said, "with your people, for as long as they'll have us. We started this war together. We see it through together. It might cost us everything. It already has." She lifted her head to look at him. "But I'd rather have this you-them, this moment, than a lifetime of safety built on lies. Wouldn't you?" Nahuel smiled, and for the first time since the battle it reached his eyes. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, I would." They sat in silence as the night deepened. Two people who'd been reshaped by choices neither had expected to make. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new hunts, new prices to pay. But tonight they had this, each other, and the hard-won knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose love when the world demands you choose sides. And in the darkness, holding each other against the cold and the coming storm that was enough. The decision to move came 3 weeks after the battle carried on the voices of scouts who reported cavalry patrols cutting closer with each passing day. The soldiers weren't attacking, not yet, but they were mapping, cataloging, preparing, building their case for the final push that would justify calling it pacification instead of genocide. Nahuel's uncle gathered the people as dawn broke cold and sharp. "We leave at first light tomorrow," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of too many retreats, too many abandonments of places they'd called home. "North and west. There's a valley 3 weeks' travel, hidden. The old ones say it's protected by spirits that confuse white men's compasses. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's just remote enough they haven't stolen it yet." He paused, looking at each face in turn. "Either way, it's our best chance." Evelyn stood beside Nahuel, feeling the collective grief of people being forced to flee again. She'd learned enough of their language now to understand the whispered conversations that barely contained anger. Some blamed her, some blamed Nahuel. Most just blamed the inevitable tide of history that seemed determined to wash them all away. "They hate me," she said quietly that night as they packed their few belongings. "They hate the situation," Nahuel corrected, rolling a blanket with practiced efficiency. "You're just the most visible reminder of it." He looked at her. "Does it change anything? Make you want to leave?" She thought about it honestly. "No, it makes me want to prove them wrong, show them I'm worth the trouble I caused." "You already have." His hand found hers. "You fought beside us, bled beside us. That matters more than blood or skin color to most of them. The rest will come around or they won't. Either way, you're one of us now." One of us. The words settled in her chest like warmth, like belonging she'd never felt in all her years of San Francisco society. There she'd been decoration. Here she was necessary, flawed and foreign and learning, but necessary. The exodus began with dawn's first light. Women carried children and supplies. Warriors scouted ahead and behind, watching for threats that could come from any direction. The elderly moved slowly but steadily, their faces set with the grim determination of people who'd survived worse and would survive this too. Evelyn walked beside Nita, the young woman who'd first taught her words in their language. They'd become something like friends, bound by the shared experience of women trying to survive in a world designed to break them. "How many times have your people done this?" Evelyn asked as they walked. "Moved because soldiers came, too many to count," Nita said, adjusting the pack on her back. "My grandmother says we used to stay in one place for generations, build lives that lasted. Now," she gestured at the line of people stretched ahead and behind, "now we're always moving, always one step ahead of the next broken promise." "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, but Evelyn meant them. Nita looked at her, something complicated in her expression. "You know what's strange? At first I hated you. Thought you were just playing at being one of us. Thought you'd run back to your comfortable life the first time things got hard." She paused. "But you didn't. You stayed. You worked. You fought. And now when I look at you, I don't see a white woman anymore. I just see Evelyn. Someone who chose to be here when she could have chosen anywhere else." "Is that enough?" Evelyn asked. "Does it make up for what my father and men like him have done?" "No," Nita said honestly. "Nothing makes up for that. But it's something, and something is better than nothing." They walked in silence after that, but it felt different. Less like tolerance and more like acceptance. It wasn't everything, but Evelyn was learning that in this life, nothing ever was. The journey north was brutal. They traveled through country that seemed designed to kill all sharp rocks and scarce water temperatures that swung from freezing nights to scorching days. Twice they spotted cavalry patrols and had to divert, adding days to their journey. A child fell ill with fever, and despite everything Kaya tried, died on the 5th day. They buried her in a shallow grave marked only by stones, unable to give her the ceremony she deserved. Evelyn felt each loss like a personal weight. This child had died because they were running. They were running because soldiers had come. Soldiers had come because of her. The logic was circular and damning, and no amount of Nahuel's reassurance could fully erase it. On the 10th day, they crossed into country Evelyn had never seen on any map. The landscape here felt older somehow, like they'd passed through some invisible boundary, into a place that remembered what the world was before fences and deeds claimed to make it knowable. The rocks rose in formations that looked almost deliberate, and the few trees that grew twisted toward the sun like dancers frozen mid-step. "My grandfather brought me here once," Nahuel said as they walked. "When I was young, before Carlisle, he said this land protects its own, that white men who try to claim it get turned around lost until they stumble back out thinking they dreamed it." "Do you believe that?" Evelyn asked. I believe there are things maps don't show and compasses don't measure. He pointed ahead where the land seemed to fold in on itself, creating an optical illusion of distance and depth. I believe if we're going to disappear, this is where we do it. They reached the valley on the 18th day. It appeared suddenly a hidden basin surrounded by rock walls that made it invisible until you were practically standing on its edge. Below, grass grew tall and green, fed by a spring that seemed to bubble up from the earth itself. Trees clustered near the water, cottonwoods and willows that shouldn't exist in this desert climate, but did anyway, defying logic with their existence. This is it. Nahuel's uncle said, his voice holding something like wonder. This is where we make our stand, not against soldiers, against forgetting, against disappearing. We build here, we live here, and if they find us, he shrugged, then at least we die in a place worth defending. The work of building began immediately. Hide dwellings rose near the spring. Gardens were planted in soil that proved surprisingly fertile. Hunters brought back deer and rabbit, more game than they'd seen in months. It felt like the land itself was offering sanctuary, this one small piece of earth that hadn't yet been catalogued and claimed and destroyed. Evelyn worked alongside everyone else, her hands blistering and healing and blistering again. She helped build, plant, hunt, cook. Nahuel taught her to track game, to read the land for signs of water and shelter. Kaya taught her which plants healed and which killed. Nita taught her songs in their language, old songs about creation and loss and the stubborn refusal to surrender. The weeks turned into months. Summer gave way to autumn, painting the valley in shades of gold and rust. No soldiers came, no scouts appeared on the ridges. It was as if they'd found the one place the world had forgotten to destroy. One evening, as the first winter cold crept into the air, Evelyn sat outside the dwelling she now shared openly with Nahuel. They'd built it together, stone and cedar, small but sturdy. A home, the first real home she'd ever had that felt like hers rather than a cage dressed up in silk. Nahuel emerged carrying 2 cups of tea made from herbs Kaya had gathered. He handed her one and sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How strange it is that I'm happy," she said. "I've lost everything I was supposed to want. My family, my status, my comfortable life. I'm wanted by the law. My father probably thinks I'm dead or worse. And yet," she looked at him, "I've never been happier. Is that wrong?" "No," he said quietly. "It's human. We're not meant to be comfortable. We're meant to be ourselves. You were just taught those were the same thing, and they're not. Do you think we'll be found?" She'd learned not to say safe. Safe was an illusion, but found, that was a real question. Eventually. Nahuel sipped his tea, watching the stars emerge. Nothing stays hidden forever, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that we found this place, this moment, this life. Even if it's temporary, we lived it. That's more than most people get. "I want more than temporary," Evelyn said. "I want forever." "Then we'll fight for it." He took her hand. "However long this lasts, a year, 10 years, 50, we'll live it completely. That's all anyone can promise." Winter came gentle to the valley, cold, but not killing. They survived it, not easily, but well enough. Spring brought new life. Gardens bloomed. Children were born, including one to Nita, who asked Evelyn to help with the birth, despite the traditional role being reserved for elders. The child was a boy, healthy and loud, and holding him for the first time, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. Hope, maybe, or the possibility of it. By the second summer, the valley had become something close to permanent. More structures, better gardens, even a small corral for horses they'd traded for with a friendly tribe to the west. It felt like civilization, but the right kind, built on need and community, rather than conquest and greed. Evelyn had changed so much, she barely recognized herself. Her hands were calloused and strong, her skin was dark from sun, Her hair, once elaborately styled, now hung in a simple braid down her back. She spoke the language fluently now, with only a slight accent that marked her as forever foreign but trying. She could shoot straight track game birth children, heal wounds. She'd become useful in ways that mattered. One afternoon, while working in the garden, she looked up to see a rider approaching. Her heart seized soldiers finally, but then she recognized the figure. It was one of their scouts, returning from a supply run to a friendly trading post 2 days' ride away. But something was wrong. He was riding too fast, his face urgent. Nahuel met him at the valley entrance, Evelyn running to join them. The scout was breathing hard, his horse lathered home. "News," he gasped. "From the territories, the banker Whitmore, he's dead." Evelyn's world tilted. What heart failure, they say. 2 months ago. His business collapsed after he was investigated for fraud. Something about forged land deeds. The scout looked at her. "Your father's empire is gone, his crimes exposed, and the bounty, it's been lifted. You're no longer wanted." Silence crashed down like thunder. Evelyn stood there processing words that didn't make sense. Her father dead, the bounty gone. Everything she'd been running from dissolved like morning fog. "You're free," Nahuel said quietly. "You could go back, reclaim your name, your life." Everyone was looking at her, the scout, Nahuel, the people who'd gathered to hear the news, all of them waiting to see what she'd choose, now that choosing was optional instead of necessary. Evelyn looked around the valley, at the dwelling she'd helped build, at the garden where her vegetables grew, at Nita standing with her baby, at Kaya grinding corn, at the children playing near the spring, at Nahuel watching her with something carefully neutral in his eyes, trying not to hope, trying not to fear. She thought about San Francisco, about silk dresses and silver forks and rooms that smelled like roses, about a life where she'd been valued for her father's money and her ability to marry well, about comfort purchased with complicity in crimes she'd never questioned. Then she thought about calloused hands and straight shooting, about learning to speak a new language and birth children and survive winters, about fighting beside people who'd become her family, not through blood, but through choice, about Nahuel's hand on hers in the darkness, teaching her that survival was about more than just breathing. "No," she said simply. "No," the scout repeated confused. "No, I'm not going back." She looked at Nahuel. "This is my home. You are my people. That life, the one I had before she's still dead, being pardoned doesn't resurrect her." Something broke open in Nahuel's expression, a relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. He pulled her to him, holding her like she might disappear if he didn't. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her hair. "You could have everything back." "I have everything," she said, "right here." The people around them began to react. Some smiled, some nodded approval. Kaya actually laughed, a rare sound. "Stubborn girl," the old woman said. "Good. We need stubborn." Nahuel's uncle approached, his weathered face thoughtful. "You understand what this means? Choosing to stay when you could leave. You'll never be white again in the eyes of your people. You'll be what they call squaw, what they consider lost." "I was lost before," Evelyn said. "This is what found looks like." The old man studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, sharp. "Then welcome home, daughter, truly, not as the woman you were, but as the woman you became." That night they held a ceremony. Not a wedding, they'd been living as married for over a year already, but something else. A recognition ceremony, Nahuel called it, where the tribe formally acknowledged her as one of them, no longer guest or outsider, but member. Family. They painted her face with ochre and ash, gave her a name in their language, Tehia, meaning precious, not because she was fragile, but because she'd proven her value through choosing to stay when leaving was easier. They sang songs she'd learned and some she hadn't. They ate and danced and celebrated not her arrival, but her decision to remain. Nahuel stood beside her through all of it, his hand never leaving hers. When it was over and the people had drifted back to their dwellings, they walked to the edge of the valley and looked out at the desert beyond. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened," he asked, "if I hadn't saved you that day on the train?" Evelyn considered it. "I'd be married to Marcus Thornhill, living in a mansion in Denver, attending parties and pretending to be happy while dying slowly inside." She squeezed his hand. "So, no, I don't wonder. I'm grateful every day that you were arrogant enough to think I was worth saving." "Is that what it was, arrogance? Maybe. Or maybe you saw something in me I couldn't see in myself yet, that I was stronger than I knew, braver than I'd been allowed to be." She turned to face him. "You gave me the chance to become who I was supposed to be. How do you thank someone for that? You already have." He pulled her close, and they stood there under stars that had watched this valley long before borders or deeds tried to make it knowable. "Every day you choose to stay, you thank me. Every moment you choose this life over comfort, you prove I was right to save you." "We saved each other," Evelyn corrected. "I just took longer to realize it." They stayed there for a long time, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of two colliding worlds and built something new from the pieces. It wasn't the life either had expected. It was harder, stranger, more beautiful and terrible than anything they could have imagined, but it was theirs. Chosen, not inherited. Earned, not granted. And that made all the difference. Years passed in the hidden valley. 3, then 5, then 10. Evelyn's hair began to show strands of silver, and Nahuel's face gained lines that spoke of laughter and worry in equal measure. They never had children of their own, whether by choice or chance, they never said, but they raised others. Orphans from raids and battles, children who needed parents, and found them in this unlikely couple. The world outside continued its brutal progress. Tribes were forced onto reservations. Buffalo disappeared. The railroad cut through lands that had been promised as forever, but the valley remained hidden, this one small pocket of resistance and survival. Sometimes travelers would arrive, refugees from broken treaties and burned villages. The valley absorbed them, grew, adapted. It became something unique, not quite traditional, not quite assimilated, but something new. A place where the old ways mixed with necessary adaptations, where survival meant flexibility without surrender. Evelyn became a bridge of sorts. She could speak to white traders when needed, negotiate for supplies, navigate the legal tangles that kept threatening to expose them. She used the education her father had bought her, but for purposes he never intended. Not to maintain an empire, but to protect people from one. And through it all, she and Nahuel held each other. Through hard winters and harsh summers. Through losses that broke them, and victories that barely felt like victories. Through the slow, grinding knowledge that they were fighting a war they'd ultimately lose, but refusing to surrender anyway. On a spring evening in their 15th year, in the valley, they sat outside their dwelling as they had 1,000 times before. Evelyn was pressing wildflowers into a book, preserving beauty that would otherwise fade. Nahuel was repairing tack, his hands still sure despite the years. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, not for the first time. "Which part?" he replied, not looking up from his work. "Any of it, saving me, choosing me, staying with me." He set down his work and looked at her, really looked at her, at the silver in her hair and the laugh lines around her eyes, at hands that had held babies and weapons with equal competence, at a woman who'd become exactly who she was meant to be, even though the world had told her otherwise. "Every damn day," he said, the same answer as always. "And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. That's what makes it love instead of just survival." Evelyn smiled, the expression lighting her weathered face with something that transcended simple happiness. It was deeper than that. Satisfaction, maybe. Or the knowledge that she'd lived completely loved without reservation, chosen herself when the world tried to choose for her. "Look at us," she said. "The kidnapped heiress and the Apache ghost. The scandal they wrote newspaper stories about. Do you think anyone still tells those stories? Nahuel asked. Probably, but they get the ending wrong. Evelyn reached for his hand. In their version, I'm either rescued or destroyed. In ours, she gestured at the valley at the life they'd built. In ours, I chose destruction and found salvation instead. That's not the kind of ending they write. No, Nahuel agreed. It's better. The sun set, painting the valley in shades of gold and crimson. Hawks circled overhead, hunting in the cooling air. Somewhere nearby, children laughed, not their children by blood, but theirs nonetheless. The sound of life continuing, persisting, refusing to surrender. Some wars are fought with bullets and treaties and broken promises. Others are fought with the courage to love what the world forbids. To choose yourself when everyone says you belong to something else. To build a life from the ashes of the life you were told to live. Evelyn Whitmore had run from death on that train so many years ago and found something far more dangerous: freedom. The kind that came from within, that couldn't be granted or taken away. She'd lost everything her father's money could buy and gained everything that actually mattered. And sitting there in the valley beyond reach, holding the hand of the man who'd taught her to survive and then to live, she understood something essential: true love cannot be owned or sanctioned or controlled. It can only be chosen day after day, moment after moment, despite every reason the world gives you to choose otherwise. They'd run from the war, they'd awakened these two impossible people in love. But what they'd really done was refuse to fight the war on anyone's terms but their own. And in the end, that defiance, that stubborn, beautiful, terrifying refusal to live any life but the one they chose, was the greatest victory of all.